Welcome to another edition of the Mailtime Podcast. I'm joined today by Gershon Baskin. It's Thursday, October 9th. He just came out with a groundbreaking article talking about this hostage agreement that was announced just last night. Gershon Baskin has extensive experience, is very involved in the Shalit deal, and as this post that he put on Times of Israel reveals, he had quite a bit of involvement in this back channel. So first of all, Mr. Baskin, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And for the right-wing people that are going to start blasting the conversation, I'm just going to preemptively say pound sand, because it's important to hear different perspectives. And I think that what Gershon raises here is very important. So for those who have not yet read your article, do you mind just summarizing some of the key takeaways?
I think that the deal that was done last night and just signed about half an hour ago was the best deal possible for all of us here to get this war to be over. It should have ended a long time ago, to bring the hostages home, 20 living hostages and another 28 deceased hostages. I think that we could have brought more hostages home alive if we had done the same deal a year ago, and it could have been done a year ago. The big difference that I write about in the article is, of course, the existence of President Trump and the projection of American power that President Trump brought to the table that was absent during the Biden administration. The resolve of President Trump to end the war, I think too late. I think that we expected Trump to do this months ago when he first met Netanyahu in Washington. But instead of Trump convincing Netanyahu to end the war then, Netanyahu convinced Trump to give a green light to Israel to go on its attack in Gaza City, which was totally unnecessary. A deal could have been done then. It could have been done last September. I brought an agreement from Hamas last September to end the whole thing within 3 weeks, to return all the hostages at one time. Same thing that's being agreed to right now. So I gave some of the inside details of how this was done. I think a big turning point was the assassination attempt of Israel, of the Hamas leadership in Doha. I think that's the time when Trump decided that Israel had gone too far, even if people believe that Trump knew about it and perhaps gave a green light for it before it happened. The failed assassination led Trump to totally dissociate himself from that Israeli action, and apparently convinced Trump that the war had to come to an end. And he brought Netanyahu to Washington, or they met in the UN in September in New York. And Trump told Netanyahu, that's it, it's over. A couple of weeks later, Witkoff produced his 21 points, which was then reduced to 20 points. But Netanyahu was locked into the agreement, and then Trump and Witkoff brought together the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Turks, and other Arab and Islamic countries, and locked Hamas into the deal. And then it was just the formalities in the last couple of days of negotiating some of the details. There are a lot of details that are still unknown. I would say, from what I know, that all of them have basically been worked out, even if they're not published yet. They will be in the coming days, perhaps a week. But the most important thing is that after the government meeting this evening, when the government will approve the deal, the ceasefire will begin, and Hamas will begin making arrangements for releasing the hostages.
Do you think that Hamas knows where all the hostages are, specifically the
No,
deceased
I'm sure that
hostages?
they don't. I'm sure that they don't know where some of the deceased hostages are. I believe that they know where all the living hostages are. But part of the agreement was that an international team made up of Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, Israel, and of course Hamas on the other side, is being formed to locate any hostage bodies that they don't know where they are. It's very likely that there might be some bodies underneath the rubble of buildings that Israel blew up. It could very much be that some bodies will never be recovered, which is the case of many Palestinians who are buried underneath the rubble of buildings that Israel bombed. There are thousands of Palestinians in Gaza who are unaccounted for, and no one knows where they are. So it's very likely that there might be hostages, Israeli hostages as well, underneath some of that rubble.
Now, I want to ask you a right-wing question here. So people are going to say, okay, so we get the hostages back, and then Hamas's leverage is now gone because there's no reason for Israel to have restraint. What stops Israel's government and army from being able to then obliterate Hamas?
What I can tell you is what we already know, what's been published. What I won't tell you is what hasn't been published yet. But what has been published is that there are American guarantees that Israel won't renew the war. Those American guarantees are backed by the deployment of a probably Arab-led multinational force in Gaza, which will replace the Israeli army. Eventually, the Israeli army will completely withdraw from Gaza, but there will be a multinational force in Gaza. This is unprecedented in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that force will be made up of not only Arab countries, but also friendly European countries, perhaps led by an American general. We don't know that yet. But those kind of realities of change on the ground, which also include a new Palestinian government in Gaza, which has nothing to do with Hamas, and there will be a mechanism for taking the weapons away from Hamas. That hasn't been detailed yet, but that will also be part of the upcoming agreement and a mechanism for doing that. It doesn't mean that every Hamas rifle will be taken from them. Right now, Hamas people in Gaza are saying we need to hold on to our rifles, not against Israel, but against Gazans who want to kill us. That's the reality in Gaza today. Hamas is an element which is not wanted in Gaza today, and they are definitely under threat. We will probably see the decision of some of the Hamas commanders to leave Gaza. That's part of the agreement as well. They will be allowed to leave Gaza with their families to a third country, maybe
What
Turkey,
what
maybe
what what
Qatar.
country would want them? Okay, Qatar, Turkey. Okay.
Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, those are, there are others that have been talked about, maybe Indonesia, maybe Malaysia. There are different places that they could go to. We're not talking about any serious commanders or leaders because there are none left in Gaza. The Hamas political leadership in Gaza has been killed. The Hamas military commanders have been killed. We're talking about second, third, fourth level officers of Hamas's Ezedin al-Qassam forces in Gaza today. No one's really that important.
Now, I want to ask again, this is going to be a contention from the right, or perhaps even some of the centrist people in Israel, which is saying that there's been a very large part of the population in Gaza that is convinced that Israel is attempting uh, to carry out a genocide because that's what they're being told by Al Jazeera, and that Israel is trying to displace them, meaning kick them out of Gaza, and that's the agenda of the quote unquote Israel project. How do you reconcile the the feeling of the Gazan population and this governing coalition that we put in place with being able to maintain a peace and not having Israel forced to be very nervous that there's going to be some sort of conflict, whether that's 2 or 5 years down the road?
Yeah, first, let me say something that's really going to piss off your right wing listeners. Genocide is a legal term, and there's a legal definition of what genocide is. It's not the Holocaust. It's not what the Nazis did to the Jews in World War II, but there's a definition, an international convention that Jews were part of writing after World War II. So there is a legal definition of what is genocide, and what Israel has
Sure.
committed in Gaza over the last 2 years fits the definition of genocide according to the International Convention for the Prevention of Genocide. Gaza has been made
One
uninhabitable.
second. I'll say this. I'm going to let you speak. I don't want to cut you off as the whole thing. That's not, I don't interview Piers Morgan style. Okay. I'm just going
Okay?
to, please continue what you're saying, even though I'm going to say I disagree with some of it, but please.
No
Yeah.
problem. You
Yeah.
can agree or disagree. There is an
Sure.
international legal definition on the term of genocide based on the Convention for the Prevention of Genocide. Gaza has been made uninhabitable. Israel has demolished the infrastructure of Gaza, the water, the roads, the electricity, the sewage. Israel has erased almost every school in Gaza, almost every hospital in Gaza, erased the 7 universities that were in Gaza. 2 million people are homeless in Gaza. That fits the definition of genocide. It is not the wiping out of a people, but it is the wiping out of a civilization. And that's what's happened in Gaza over the last 2 years. So if Gazans believe that there's been a genocide committed by Israel in Gaza over the past 2 years, it's not only Gazans, it's most of the international community that believes that a genocide has been committed by Israel in Gaza. So Gazans are not alone. But if you ask a Gazan today, what is the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or what do you want to see happening tomorrow? What they will tell you is, I want to know where my food is coming from, where my water is coming from, where I'm going to be living until the rubble is cleared and houses can be rebuilt. They are not talking politics today in Gaza, and they're not talking about destroying Israel. Most Gazans, while they have deep-seated hatred toward Israel because of what Israel has done over the past 2 years, place most of the blame on Hamas. Gazans are fed up. They want to. They want this war to end, and they want to get on with their lives, and they never want to see someone from Hamas again. It doesn't mean that
And your
Hamas.
understanding of this is that Hamas is essentially done with this deal.
Hamas in the Gaza Strip is done. I think that Hamas has to face the reality as a Palestinian political movement that there is no viable armed struggle for freeing Palestine. They will never free Palestine by killing Israeli Jews. Never. And the lesson of this war in Gaza for all Palestinians, not only those who support Hamas, but for those Palestinians living in the West Bank or the diaspora or wherever they are, or the so-called pro-Palestinian people around the world, is that there is no way that Palestinians are going to achieve freedom if Israel doesn't have security. And this is something they need to understand. Israelis need to understand that we will never have security if Palestinians don't have freedom. This is going to be an ongoing conflict until we understand that we have to resolve it. We can't manage this conflict. The lesson of the war in Gaza has to be that this has to be the last Israeli-Palestinian war. We can't keep doing this. There are 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living on the land between the river and the sea, and we have to figure out a way to share it. It's a common shared homeland for two people who claim it for themselves. And that can't continue. We have to find a way of sharing this homeland, whether it be one state, which I don't support, or 2 states, which I do support, or 10 states or 20 states, or whatever the formula it is. What has to happen now, after this war is over, and after we change our leadership, us being Israel and Palestine, change our leadership, is that we need to get to the hard work of understanding that this conflict has to end.
Just as a side note here, it's really crazy that we're sitting here in 2025 and Gershon Baskin, you are saying that Trump is doing a better job than Biden. And there's just all sorts of weird political pieces that if you would have asked about this 5-10 years ago, you would have said that's crazy that you're going to hear.
Look, I agree with you totally, but something I wrote in my piece that I published today is that 3 weeks before Trump entered the White House, I had a meeting with the Israeli head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, who asked me in that meeting not to use my back channels because he said to me with a straight face that in 3 weeks there's going to be an agreement. And I looked at my phone with the date on it and realized that 3 weeks was January 20th, the date that Trump enters the White House. Now, Trump told Netanyahu he wants a ceasefire before he enters the White House. And the ceasefire deal went into effect on January 19th. So from that point, 3 weeks before Trump entered the White House, I came to the conclusion that the only way this war is going to end is if Trump makes it end. That was my conclusion 3 weeks before he entered the White House. I had no doubt about it since the time, and we're now in October, so 10 months later. I focused all of my efforts over the last 10 months to trying to get on board with the Americans on a path toward ending the conflict while keeping my open contacts to 8 different members of the Hamas leadership in order to be useful at a time when it would be crucial that the Americans were on board to end this war, and we needed to talk to Hamas. From my point of view, Israel was not a part of this back channel negotiation because at the end of the day, there was no one in Israel to talk to. The heads of the negotiation team in Israel told me that the prime minister, Netanyahu, didn't want to end the war. So as long as that was the point, there was no way of getting all the hostages home without an agreement to end the war. And I knew that the only way to end the war is if Trump makes Netanyahu end the war. And that's what has happened.
And you mentioned there a few points here before I let you go. You said there's a line here, and I'm just going to find it quickly. You said, even though the 3-week deal, this is going back to the proposal in September
2024.
Right. Proposal landed on the desk of President Biden. His person in charge, Brett McGurk, refused to stray from the bad deal that he was negotiating. So what did Steve Witkoff get right that Brett McGurk did not understand?
Steve Witkoff, like Trump, from the very beginning bought into the Israeli narrative that Israel could force Hamas to surrender. I kept telling Witkoff for months that Hamas will never surrender to Israel. And it was only when Trump understood that the war had to end and he would force Netanyahu to end it that we would get a deal. So it took time. As I wrote in the article, the breaking point for President Trump was the failed assassination attempt in Doha in September. It was very important for Trump at that point to dissociate himself from the Israeli plan, even though I don't think you can find a single person in the Middle East who doesn't believe that Trump didn't give the green light for it. That doesn't matter. Trump immediately dissociated himself from it. And I think it was from that point, the following day, that he gave Witkoff the instructions to work out a deal to end the war. Trump met with Netanyahu in September and told him, that's it, the war is going to end, and you're going to agree to it. And then it was just a matter of nailing Hamas into the deal, because after the assassination attempt, Hamas lost any trust, of little trust that they had in the American side. And it took a few weeks to build a mechanism, which involved the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the Turks, to put the pressure on Hamas to agree to the deal.
Got it. And then the next thing here
But,
is
but the bottom line is that I wrote there also that unfortunately, President Biden, who I think overall was a good president for America, but he projected American weakness around the world. And Trump is exactly the opposite. I think Trump is not a great president for America, but he projects American power around the world. And it was the projection of American power that made this deal happen.
like I said before, I'm not a Piers Morgan attack you on every little thing here. I think I want people to evaluate your ideas here. And the great thing is we don't have to agree on a lot of things, but I think we can agree on the projection of power there. Absolutely. My question, there's a line here which perhaps I just had missed this previously being disclosed, but you said Jared Kushner's role at this point was crucial because in the near future, Ron Dermer will be working for Kushner and not for Netanyahu. Is that
Yeah, look,
that's a
it's
known
been
thing?
reported. It's been reported in Israel that Dermer is resigning from the government within a
Yes.
month.
Mm-hmm.
And it was reported in several sources that Dermer is going to be working with Kushner in his investment fund. So I don't know for 100% that it's true,
Right.
but it makes sense if Kushner suddenly showed up
Right.
at the final round of negotiations to remind Dermer that he's no longer going to be working for Netanyahu. He's going to be working for someone else.
Well, it's also been reported that Witkoff is done soon. My question,
I don't know about that. I mean, Witkoff has a deal to make in Russia and Ukraine, and another.
right?
He's the go-to guy for Trump right now.
So let me ask you, and just you're involved. I mean, there's not so many people that can say that they're actually talking to Hamas, and I think that's a interesting angle. And also, there's a lot of players that, for very good reason, a lot of people are very skeptical of. But how do you reconcile some of the conflicts of interest from a business perspective with countries that are either outright adversarial or kind of towing that line? So Qatar, for example, how do you think it plays that Witkoff has business interests that are intertwined with Qatar, has a business relationship with them? Does that impact at all their ability to talk?
Apparently not. Look, my own talking to Hamas for 18 years now has been motivated by one single thing, that's to save human lives. I believe if to negotiate with the devil, we can save human lives, then we should do it. And Hamas is definitely the devil. I never enjoyed talking to them.
Do you say that to their face?
I have said that to their face, yes, over the last 18 years, including over the last 2 years. I will certainly never shed a tear by Hamas not being a factor in our conflict anymore, and I hope they disappear forever. Um, with regard to business interests, look, they say business have strange bedfellows. I thought it was very interesting that Witkoff was selected by Trump to be his Middle East emissary because he's an American Jew from New York, a real estate mogul, whose major investments have been in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and not in Israel. And this is the first time, perhaps, in the history of U.S. Middle East emissaries that it's not an American Jew whose primary focus is on Israel. I think Witkoff, through his job, has developed very close relations with the state of Israel, with some members of the Israeli government, with all the hostage families. He has developed a very close relationship and demonstrated unique humanity and empathy. We recall the the meeting of him with Idan Alexander when he gave a Jewish star that belonged to his son who had passed away and asked Idan Alexander to wear it in memory of Steve Witkoff's son. I sent him a note that day saying what a mensch he was, what a noble thing that he did by granting that Jewish star of his own son, his own deceased son, to Idan Alexander. And I think Steve Witkoff has done a remarkable job. So the fact that he does business with Qatar, that's his own business. And you know that Trump is very close friends with the emir and with the prime minister, and Steve Witkoff is very close friends with the prime minister. Um, I don't know what the long-term perspective is on Qatar. We noticed a change in the line of Al Jazeera just 2 days ago,
Do you
where
believe that?
Al Jazeera in Arabic came out with a report criticizing Hamas, even calling on Hamas to change its role and its position. This comes from the top down.
And you're
It's not
buying
a
that this is you're buying that this is a permanent thing?
I don't buy anything. I believe that everyone lies all the time. And I think that the only thing that we can trust is what actually happens on the ground. So let's watch it and see it. If
Right.
Al Jazeera continues that line, then we will know that there's a real change that's happening. Qatar, I think, understands um, some of the really negative roles that they've played in empowering Hamas. And if Qatar has made a decision now that it wants to change its role and its position and really open up to different possibilities, like, look, you know, after Oslo, Qatar, I think, was the first Arab country that Israel opened up an interest office. There was an Israeli interest office in Doha in 1994. And it worked there until, if I remember correctly, the breakout of the Second Intifada. So Qatar, with its strange position of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood,
Right.
was also open to Israel. And Israelis have flown in and out of Qatar, the hostage families in particular, over the past 2 years, welcomed by the Qatari government. So they have a very strange position of one side being the voice of the Muslim Brotherhood, on the other side looking to play a positive role where they've met with Israelis over time. Israel kind of screwed that up with the attack on Qatari soil, but there was an apology officially done by Netanyahu to the Qatari prime minister, and Trump signed a mutual defense agreement with Qatar. So
Now,
it's a strange world.
do you think that the voice and the volume of this attempt to save the hostages was helpful?
Listen, if you were to talk to the Shalit family or talk to Tami Arad and ask them, should the hostage families be silent as they've been asked to do or to be told to do, they would tell you that the biggest mistake that they made was being silent for too long. I had a Zoom with 50 of the hostage families a week after October 7th, and it was more than an hour long. And I asked them at the end, if you forget everything that I said, I want you to remember two things. One is don't shut up. Tell the name of your loved one, show their picture, tell their story. Every household in Israel should know who they are. And two, at the end of the day, after you visited the whole world and got support from every leader around the world and meet with the US president and foreign dignitaries from all over the world, you're going to be facing the Israeli government, because it's the Israeli government that's going to have to make the decision whether or not to free your loved ones. And to this day, I believe that both of those things are true. Now, I went to almost every demonstration that I could, certainly every Saturday night over the last months in Jerusalem to the demonstrations. I never left those demonstrations feeling good. I always felt that we were powerless to do anything, that we have a heartless prime minister who has no compassion and was only interested in continuing the war for his own political survival. And I believe that till this day, if Trump didn't force Netanyahu to end the war, Netanyahu would keep on going, fighting in Gaza until every building in Gaza City was destroyed. Um, so I believe that they don't mimic the words of Hamas. They are concerned with only one thing, and that's bringing their loved ones home. And you can't criticize a hostage family, whether their loved one is alive or dead, for wanting to bring them home. And everything that they do that empowers them to bring their loved ones home is beyond any form of criticism. None of them mimic the words of Hamas. None of them showing the videos that were published of their loved ones were intending on strengthening Hamas or empowering Hamas or playing the psychological warfare of Hamas. It was aimed all at putting pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and the government of Israel to make the deal to bring their loved ones home. And that, in my mind, is the ultimate Jewish thing to do.
So wait,
The retrieval.
I agree
Go
with
ahead.
you. No, no, I agree with you in the intention. I don't think my question is in the effectiveness as you're back channeling, and you do you think it strengthens or do you think it that's my question. It's not about I
I
don't
don't
think
think it.
anyone's yeah.
I don't think it had any influence in the end of the day on the negotiations and getting the deal done, other than the fact that the hostage families managed to enter the heart and mind of Donald Trump much more effectively than they entered the heart and the mind of Benjamin Netanyahu. And that was the most important thing that they could do. And there's no question in my mind that Trump feels a lot of empathy and compassion for the families of the hostages. And the main motivation for him to do this deal, other than getting the Nobel Peace Prize, which I hope he gets, we'll know tomorrow, is to bring those hostages home. It was real for him. And I think that the voice of the hostage families over and over again over the past 2 years, including the families of those whose hostages, whose loved ones have been retrieved, including the ones whose hostages, whose loved ones were retrieved dead, like the family of Hirsch, Poland Goldberg. Rachel and John continue to be active players in speaking the words of the hostage families throughout the past 2 years, even after Hirsch was killed. And I think that people like them had a deep impact on this process.
Gershon Baskin, I really appreciate taking the time, especially on short notice. I encourage everyone to check out Gershon's latest article. It's full of some amazing anecdotes and really behind the scenes stuff. And check him out on Twitter. And I hope we can have you back as this. Hopefully, there's more hostages that are out and continued good news for everyone involved in the conflict. So thank you so much.
Thank you.